Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
I'd say the Half-Life 2 modding scene doesn't quite stack up in terms of quantity against other FPS games like Doom or even Half-Life 1, but it's had its fair share of mods all the same. One of the most famous mods I think for Half-Life 2 is the cinematic mod, but for all the wrong reasons, and I'm not even sure when exactly the whole thing started. It's been a while since I've played through Half-Life 2 and stepped into the boots of my favourite HEV suit-wearing protagonist, so I downloaded the 16GB installer and checked it out to see what it's all about.
Dr. Freeman, I presume.
Now here's how Cinematic Mod describes itself. Cinematic Mod raises the outdated graphical appearance of the Half-Life 2 trilogy to a state-of-the-art level, whilst giving it a more stressed, darker and minatory look. All low-res textures are replaced with high-res counterparts. Cinematic Mod adds an emotional cinematic music soundtrack, optional HD models and unused content from the original games. Now that all sounds good in theory, but I don't think there's ever been a Half-Life 2 mod as notorious as this one. Notorious for its mashing of different visual styles, notorious for a huge goddamn dildo in Alex Vance's bedroom, and for its salty developer, a German guy named Fake Factory who apparently isn't the best at taking criticism. At the most basic level, what Cinematic Mod has done is exactly what it sets out to do. Update the game's presentation to make it feel a bit more contemporary. The textures have all been updated and are generally of a much higher level of fidelity, though a lot of the time they don't quite match up with everything else thematically, even though they are a lot more detailed and sharper. When I ran the installer, I was a little bit shocked to see the game would take up close to 50GB of hard drive space, compared to I think like 2 or 3GB that Half-Life 2 originally takes up. I mean, as a comparison, the recently released Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus took up 54GB, and that's a game that's easily more demanding visually and looks way better. But then when you get into the mod and see the new textures and the models, you'll probably understand why, as almost every single aspect of the game's presentation has been overhauled, presumably in the most uncompressed way possible. Certain areas of the game are now much more populated with props to give the game a much richer sense of detail. Now this might be more pieces of garbage scattered around the outskirts of City 17 or grass patches speckled here and there, or the same looking fern copied and pasted 100 times over. And let me say, if you had a problem with physics items getting stuck under your feet in vanilla Half-Life 2, well, wait until you play this. Kelly Bailey's iconic soundtrack, a mix of orchestral and electronic instruments, has been replaced by a soundtrack deemed more cinematic, which is mostly just by the sounds of it Hans Zimmer tracks from the Dark Knight trilogy, which adapt dynamically to what you're doing in the game. So if you're just walking around, the music is a bit quieter and less intense, but engage in combat and it really starts to ramp up to suit the action. And look, honestly, it's probably the best thing about the entire mod is just how well this music works. Now, I'm not sure if this works so well because Hans Zimmer music goes well with everything or if it's being utilized properly, but I'm not gonna lie, flying through the canals on the airboat and hearing that thumping score from the Dark Knight as I'm being shot at by the Hunter Chopper is pretty damn epic. Honestly though, I don't mind these changes all that much. I think how bad the environments look is blown a little bit out of proportion. I think the main issue is that the style from area to area can often differ greatly to the point where it sometimes doesn't even look like you're playing the same game. This is most noticeable during the chapters in Highway 17, where it almost looks more like the similar outdoor areas from Episode 2, which I think is an attempt to link them together visually, except both games took place in different areas geographically, so it doesn't make all that much sense. And like I said, it doesn't really feel much like the original Highway 17, it just feels like a different area entirely. Same goes for a lot of the character models, especially the women. All of the variants of Alex honestly look like Victoria's Secret models, and it just seems out of place with Half-Life 2's decidedly dystopian theme. All of the weapons have been given a bit of a visual facelift, and some have been outright replaced. The USP is replaced with a SOCOM with a laser sight, which completely messes up aiming, but hey, I guess laser sights are more cinematic, right? The MP7 is now an MP5, and I'm not even too sure what they've used to replace the Overwatch pulse rifle. Again, it looks like an MP5, just with a sight attached. But I'm sure someone in the comments can correct me, and probably will. Other weapons from Half-Life 2 like the crossbow, the RPG and the shotgun look like they're still based off the same weapons, they've just got high resolution textures to make them look, I guess, a little bit better. Though whether or not they look better is up to someone's personal point of view. It's the character models though where things just start to get a little bit silly. By default, the character models are the originals from Half-Life 2 with nothing changed. But using this little program in the game's directory called the Character Pimper, you can choose whether or not to update every single character model into the game to the cinematic mod standard. Now, whereas every other character in the game has literally either an on or an off option for their cinematic model, Alex has 38 different options. This is split up between 4 or 5 different models, with each model then having half a dozen or so variants. You can even choose to change her outfit during the campaign, so say when you first meet her during the prologue you want her in a hat and jeans, but then later on when you're blasting through Nova Prospect, you'd want her decked out in some kind of combat suit. Well, as Captain Planet used to say, Sonny Jim, the power is yours. It's pretty hard to overstate just how dumb some of these models look, and every variant is pretty much hypersexualized, and they're apparently based off supermodels, which makes sense. And if that's not enough TNA for you, well, there's also the numerous photos of other semi-naked women throughout the game world, and then there's outright pornographic graffiti as well. I'm not even joking. Fake Factory, you are one seriously horny dude. To be honest though, it all just kind of adds to the charm and the bizarrety of the whole thing. And there is actually a pretty vanilla version of Alex that looks mostly like the original, just again with high resolution texture work and a bit more detail overall.
Dr. Freeman, I presume.
Same can't be said about the others though, especially Barney. I mean, I don't even know who he's supposed to be based off now.
It's me, Gordon. Barney from Black Mesa.
But I can deal with changing around the visuals. I don't care if you replace characters with Keanu Reeves or Scarlett Johansson. And I can even get over the fact that he's added in a giant dildo in Alex's bedroom. Whoa! But what I can't stand is when the gameplay gets fucked with, and that's where Cinematic Mod really shits the bed. For some reason, Fake Factory decided to mess around with the way a lot of the weapons handle, specifically the pistol, the SMG, and the assault rifle. So now you pretty much have to use iron sights with these things in combat, or else you often won't be able to hit the side of a goddamn barn. Here's a little clip of me firing the MP5 for instance, and you can just see how all over the place the accuracy is now because of the way he's screwed around with the weapon's recoil and spread. The pistol suffers from this the least, but the idiotic laser sight, which I don't think you can even turn off, throws off my aim a fair bit, because the sight doesn't always aim up with the crosshair on screen, making it really confusing. I don't think the AI has been modified to suit these new ballistics because those armed with machine guns now seem to have stormtrooper accuracy and often barely hit me. Compared to the shotgun wielding Combine, who thanks to the increased damage output from the shotgun are now even more annoying and dangerous. The one thing that didn't need to be increased in Half-Life 2 was the goddamn shotgun damage. The shooting was never that good in Half-Life 2 to begin with. I mean, you're using hit-scanning weapons and fighting hit-scanning enemies like 90% of the time, so there was very little variety in it to begin with, but the fact that it's now substantially worse off in this mod speaks volumes. I've noticed a lot of minor changes as well, like somehow the airboat section is a lot worse off too. Now, I don't know if this thing is in my head, but it seems the airboat controls a lot worse than it even did before. And it takes a special kind of magic to somehow make those controls even worse than they already were. There's other minor level design choices which mess with the flow of things as well, like the bit in Highway 17 after you've just spent a few agonizing minutes controlling that horrible magnet crane, and then you smash through a nearby window with your buggy and fly off down the highway. Well, now the road just outside the smashed window is blocked with cars that you have to stop and move with the gravity gun. All that sense of speed and energy you felt finally getting back into the buggy after that short slog comes to a dead stop as you're again doing cleanup duty. And the mod is just full of these kind of moments, and if you haven't played Half-Life 2, well, you probably might not notice this, but people who've finished it countless times definitely will, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Like I said, mess with the visuals as much as you want. Stick all the page 3 gold posters up on walls you can find, I don't care, but don't mess around with the gameplay if you don't know what the hell you're doing. I mean, if you're going to repaint the Mona Lisa, just repaint the Mona Lisa. Don't add earrings or makeup or put no Bay hat on her head, just leave her the way she is. Now, I know Fake Factory got a lot of hate for the work he did on this mod, and the word is that he stopped working on it simply because from the backlash he got from the community. And whilst I don't think the mod is amazing, I can still kind of appreciate the amount of time and effort that he's put into it over the last few years, despite how it's often turned out. If not for the ridiculous file size, I'd say Cinematic Mod would just be worth checking out for the novelty, but the download time, the installation time, and getting everything up and running can be a bit of a goddamn hassle, and considering the other changes it makes to the gameplay are highly subjective, I'd say it's not really worth it. But hey, it sure is entertaining, just not always for the right reasons.